Why did an SS commander at the Dachau complex methodically burn his uniform in April 1945? He needed to avoid identification before the imminent arrival of American troops. The command staff initiated a swift destruction of physical evidence. Officers ripped collar tabs from their tunics. They stripped rank insignia from their shoulders. A freshly polished uniform went straight into the roaring coal furnace. Personnel abandoned their standard-issue clothing across the entire facility. Guards discarded their service weapons and quickly exchanged their regulation gray wool for the striped rags of the prisoners. They fabricated temporary identification documents to blend with the captive population. The Dachau complex contained exactly 30,000 souls. 30,000 people equals the population of an entire European district center. Hiding among this high density offered a specific tactical advantage. The camp administration attempted a full operational erasure of their command structure within mere hours. They sought to downgrade their formal status from facility supervisors to undocumented displaced persons. The process demanded total erasure. The deception failed. Forward combat elements of the U.S. 45th Infantry Division secured the sector. Infantrymen moved past the rail sidings and directly approached the main compound. They bypassed the fabricated paperwork. They identified the guards. The transition from armed camp supervisors to detained prisoners of war happened instantly. Soldiers established tight perimeter cordons around the exterior concrete walls. U.S. combat troops locked the iron gates of Dachau. How did Colonel Sparks allow the liquidation of 560 individuals without a single military tribunal? Infantry officers deliberately turned their backs, establishing an immediate zone without formal jurisdiction. Destroying SS uniforms failed to prevent physical elimination, as Sparks initiated an unprecedented mass execution. 560 eliminated personnel equaled the standard manpower of a full SS combat battalion, completely eradicated in hours. The calculated absence of command generated a procedural vacuum across the secured compound. United States soldiers started transferring captured handguns and combat daggers directly to the surviving inmates. Inmates subsequently utilized those weapons, along with heavy pickaxes against the remaining facility staff. The primary phase of the liquidation concentrated at the coal yard. An American machine gunner secured his firing position opposite a concrete barrier. Soldiers forced 17 captured guards against the high wall. The gunner engaged the group, dropping 17 men instantly. The dry mechanical crack of the Browning machine gun echoed across the open square. Records indicate that infantrymen gunned down 346 individuals on the spot. The total count reached 560 liquidated camp employees. Orders explicitly prohibited all medical personnel from providing any assistance to the wounded guards. Soldiers of the 45th Infantry Division navigate through the external barbed wire barriers. They immediately collide with a stationary 50-car train line. This physical evidence discovered at the main gates served as the direct trigger mechanism for the coal yard executions several hours later. The date is April 29, 1945. Inside the open railcars lie thousands of dead inmates. A suffocating stench of advanced decay hits the infantrymen upon entering the logistics complex. The standard German freight boxcar was originally designed to transport 40 men or 8 horses. Here, the internal volume is entirely filled with stacked human corpses. This forensic discovery permanently fractures the psychological stability of the advancing troops. The camp commander, Heinrich Wicker, steps forward to meet the American forces. He intends to negotiate formal surrender protocols. SS personnel assemble behind him in pristine uniforms and polished leather boots. Wicker expects standard military procedures. He relies on legal frameworks. He calmly cites the 1929 Geneva Convention as a mechanism for his garrison's transfer. The contrast is stark. Wicker demands honorable prisoner of war treatment while standing meters away from 50 train cars filled with human remains. The diplomatic illusion collapses instantly. The 45th Infantry Division abandons all compliance with international military protocols. The forensic reality overwrites the legal documents. An American soldier breaks the perimeter line. He raises his service rifle. He fires a single shot directly into Wicker's eye. Who was the next target after the SS garrison? 300 internal collaborators, the Kapos. The commander's execution launched Phase 2. Control shifted directly to the inmates. Over 30,000 prisoners remained in Dachau. Night fell. The purge became silent. Inmates breached the prison barracks. No firearms. There were no bullet wounds. Manual strangulation. They fractured skulls. Choking sounds filled the total darkness. Internal reprisal operated autonomously. American troops stayed away. By morning, the exact number of liquidated Kapos reached 300. How did Soviet prisoners of war dispose of the captured Buchenwald guards? By April 1945, these inmates seized the camp infrastructure and locked the SS personnel inside the solitary confinement blocks. The isolation process followed a precise tactical sequence. Inmates disarmed the guards without utilizing firearms. They marched the captives down the concrete corridors toward the primary bunker building. The SS originally engineered these narrow compartments for sensory deprivation and physical stress. The standard cell measured less than 3 square meters. Space allowed no movement. POWs ordered the captured guards to kneel on the bare stone floor. Soviet military personnel controlled this entire procedure. Buchenwald held over 100,000 inmates during its operation. This extensive architecture provided a massive detention capacity for holding the former operators. Soviet commanders organized guard shifts outside the metal doors. The captives maintained the kneeling posture under constant observation. Any shift in stance drew rapid physical correction. Inmates classified death by hanging as the highest mercy. It meant fast termination. Only a few individuals received this specific execution method. The majority remained trapped inside the isolation blocks. The temperature inside the concrete cells dropped at night. The human physiological framework requires continuous calorie intake to sustain a forced kneeling position over 72 hours. Without food rations, muscle failure initiates. Fiber tissues degrade, kidneys shut down. Guards stayed locked inside. The final outcome was death from physical exhaustion inside the punishment cells. While Soviet prisoners utilized isolation tactics in other facilities, British officers at Bergen-Belsen selected a strictly biological method for eliminating the remaining camp personnel. Instead of assembling formal firing squads, military command assigned the captured SS units to forced physical labor involving direct contact with heavily infected human remains. The results of this operational protocol manifested rapidly among the captive workforce. Within the initial phase of the cleanup operation, 20 former camp guards contracted severe cases of epidemic typhus. This specific outbreak stemmed from a deliberate sanitary directive issued by the occupying forces to manage the widespread contamination. When British and Canadian armored divisions secured the perimeter in April 1945, they catalogued tens of thousands of unburied corpses scattered across the compound. The military administration organized the captured SS personnel into dedicated disposal teams for the mass graves. Allied infantrymen established secure cordons around the designated excavation zones with their Lee-Enfield rifles aimed steadily at the work details. The captive guards received orders to manually lift the decomposing bodies from the contaminated soil and transport them across the holding areas. The scale of the accumulated remains presented an extreme biological hazard to anyone operating within the containment sector. Yet the British military command issued a strict prohibition against providing the SS personnel with any protective gloves or medical masks. The guards gripped the decaying tissue with their bare hands while hauling the heavy cargo toward the burial pits. Epidemic typhus transmits primarily through the feces of human body lice, parasites that multiplied extensively across the uncollected victims within the dense camp infrastructure. Continuous physical contact without adequate respiratory or dermal barriers forced the infected vectors directly onto the skin and uniforms of the labor units. The deliberate withholding of standard sanitary equipment functioned as a calculated mechanism for pathogen transmission. The recorded count of guards who contracted the disease during these initial operations was 20. 0 service dogs survived the camp's liquidation. Parallel to the British military directives, Bergen-Belsen survivors initiated direct physical force against the remaining camp personnel. The SS primarily utilized German Shepherds and Dobermans for perimeter control and inmate intimidation. Now, the targets shifted. The elimination phase expanded to the human supervisors hiding within the compound. The captured personnel faced immediate and unorganized execution. Inmates pushed several guards directly into open fires. They burned alive. Others were dragged into the designated torture chambers. Inside these specific rooms, survivors utilized the exact same mechanical restraints and execution tools previously operated by the SS. The physical liquidation encompassed all available human and material security assets. The camp infrastructure became an instrument of retribution. No guard escaped. The final sweeps targeted the specialized canine units. Heavy wooden clubs struck the bodies of the SS guard dogs. The survivors beat the animals to death. American armor breached the Ohrdruf defensive perimeter. Tracks stopped moving. The immediate area lay quiet. SS guards did not surrender. They lay dead on the dirt. Forensic evidence indicated extreme blunt force trauma. Skulls were caved. Ribs were shattered. The exact same pattern of physical retaliation appeared here. The timeline began on April 2, 1945. The SS ordered a massive death march. 9,000 inmates were forced out. Guards abandoned the severely malnourished prisoners behind. They expected these weakened individuals to die. The calculation failed. The remaining captives organized an immediate assault. Extreme physical starvation did not prevent lethal force. They utilized heavy improvised weapons. They cornered the remaining garrison personnel. Forensics showed massive repeated impacts. Femurs and collarbones were crushed. Bare hands tore at uniform fabric. The violence was incredibly rapid. Retribution was highly systematic. No guards survived. The United States 4th Armored Division secured the sector shortly after. This specific unit operated under General Patton's Third Army. They were advancing rapidly through central Germany. General Patton entered the facility. Reporters followed him. They documented the forensic aftermath. The American commander surveyed the execution ground. The courtyard held only corpses. SS uniforms lay scattered across the dirt, every single guard displaying entirely crushed bones from the inmates' heavy blunt weapons. Where do hundreds of prisoners of war disappear in a single night? American reports from 1945 record only 50 executions. After documented incidents on the Western Front, official statistics demonstrate a massive anomaly. Lieutenant Howard Buechner, a medical officer assigned directly to the liberation forces, recognized the apparent contradiction. He initiated a forensic evaluation of the remaining infrastructure, cross-referencing spatial data with submitted command summaries. The physical reality of the compound contradicted the official narrative provided to the higher headquarters. Lieutenant Buechner conducted physical inspections of the extensive guard barracks, comparing their vast architectural scale against a solitary sheet listing 50 casualties. During April 1945, the Central Dachau garrison officially maintained a roster of more than 3,000 armed Schutzstaffel troops. The dry clatter of typewriter keys at the local command post finalized these minimized figures for the permanent archives. These deliberately fractured dispatches would subsequently function as the exclusive evidentiary foundation for international tribunals over the next several decades. A deliberate statistical compression occurred, transforming an extensive military formation into an administrative void. The remaining camp personnel vanished from the operational theater without generating the mandatory transfer manifests. Senior command officers strategically omitted the broader scale of spontaneous liquidations from their formal post-action assessments. This specific bureaucratic omission insulated the advancing military units from subsequent judicial scrutiny regarding the treatment of captured guards. The official documentary record concluded the operational incident with a highly specific, definitive metric. The final approved report documented exactly 50 deceased personnel and 0 surviving prisoners of war. Prisoner of war status required strict accounting. The legal solution to the problem consisted in abolishing the term itself. The method for creating this statistical void was documented in Marshal Rokossovsky's radiograms from the Pilsen camp. The response contained a clear order: do not use the term camp guard in any reports. The 1929 Geneva Convention contained 97 articles. They demanded the strict registration of all captured combatants. Paperwork guaranteed survival. But classification became an issue when Soviet forces secured the Pilsen facility. Thousands of captured SS guards awaited processing. Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky faced a classification problem. He commanded the Second Belarusian Front. Standard combat regulations did not cover these jailers. Rokossovsky transmitted an encrypted inquiry directly to Stalin. He requested a supreme directive on the disposal of the guard force. The telegraph apparatus crackled in the headquarters. A radio operator received the ciphered telegram from Moscow. He transcribed the incoming signal. The operator handed the decoded text to the marshal. Rokossovsky read the refusal. Stalin rejected the category. He stated that the concept of camp guards did not exist within the lists of prisoners of war. Moscow's rejection of the terminology erased the captives from the legal framework. Without recognized status, the SS personnel lost all protection under the laws of war. The headquarters relayed the received directive down to the frontline combat units. How to execute a garrison liquidation without a tribunal. Red Army units simply did not fill out registration documents. The exclusion directive hit frontline command posts almost immediately. Blank registration cards sat untouched upon the wooden desk. Standard military protocol demanded immediate action. Every captured combatant required processing. Personnel needed Form Number 2. This standard Soviet document tracked prisoner identities. Instead, the official forms remained blank. The Pilsen camp personnel faced an administrative void. No names entered the lists. Bureaucratic paperwork ceased to exist here. Without documentation, physical liquidation proceeded. Forward detachments executed the sweep. They cleared the facility. Officers died. Guards died. No one survived. No one asked. Riflemen worked without oversight. Empty paper provided legal cover. No paper meant no evidence. Accountability vanished. No forensic tracks remained. The entire staff disappeared from statistics. Allied courts require evidentiary foundations. Missing files prevent legal scrutiny. No record surfaced for post-war trials. Tribunal dockets regarding the personnel of this facility registered exactly 0 active cases. 78 years later, archival databases still contain thousands of empty cells. The deliberate omission of registration numbers created a permanent void in the evidentiary materials reviewed by post-war investigative commissions. When tribunals officially closed their proceedings regarding Second World War concentration camps, investigators faced a persistent historiographical problem. The Schutzstaffel had preventively destroyed the primary documentation connecting the personnel to the facilities. Bureaucratic erasure proved more effective than physical liquidation. Modern attempts to reconstruct these events routinely stall at the institutional level. The Arelson archives currently house approximately 30 million documents, yet researchers cannot confirm the personnel composition of these vanished garrisons. Inside the climate-controlled vaults, preservationists examine manila folders where the original prisoner inventory sheets remain conspicuously absent from the metal binding rings. The physical condition of these contemporary files demonstrates the exact scale of the information gap. The prevailing silence of the archives dictates the strict limits of modern historical analysis. The methodology of tracking these liquidations requires researchers to search for statistical deviations. Primary sources simply do not exist. This structural deficit forces investigators to constantly revisit the initial anomaly of 1945. Out of the entire facility staff subjected to the undocumented clearing protocols, the institutional memory retains only those original 50 documented names.